there is deep symbiotic connection between the microcosm and the macrocosm, between what we call psychic energy, which is the energy that you think with.
Yeah.
Just because you're not plugged into a wall doesn't mean that you have no energy. The energy that is there in your body when you wake up, when you were born, is called libido by psychologists. This libido is not plugged in anywhere like a regular electronic thing is plugged into somewhere, but it is plugged into the ether, to the world, to the universe, through these very strange metaphysical ties. But what the ancient Native American Indians understood, what the great shamans of old understood, and what the Druids understood, is that psychic energy, this thing that helps you wake up, that you think with, that you create your thoughts with, that you live your life with, and physical energy, like the sun burning and the earth moving and the waters flowing, is connected. They're not separate. In fact, the idea that they are separate is a mal idea, which is come into human beings after the genetic hybridization and the trauma to their system. After the great trauma to the system, and believe me, it was a massive trauma, so much so that just like people like Terence McKenna has said, it may have actually made the human race schizoid. According to people like the great psychologist, and his name is Julian Jaynes, the great people who've studied the brain and its growth through time. These people are believing that man is basically a schizoid creature. And very few of them, I think Jaynes does point to a cataclysm in the past. He's vague about it, but he says that some cataclysm in the past may have caused this trauma, this primal wound in the psyche of human beings.
So what you're saying is we've been disconnected from the source of the cosmic rhythms that we were supposed to be in touch with.
You bet. The natural order. And I believe, my work is always stressing that it was the willful, deliberate, it was humanoid action. It was this pole shift and the floods that caused this trauma. Now, to carry on with your answering your question, this trauma, out of the trauma of consciousness was completely gone. I mean, the human being was in such a existentially distraught situation that the ego, what we now call ego, was created. The ego has a date of birth. And I know this is kind of vague to a lot of people, but the thing that you think with and that rules your life, which is called the ego, has a date of birth. The ego, fragile as it is, awfully, destructive as it is in this world, is the entity that came about almost like a spasm in a muscle. Like when you're about to fall and your muscle sort of spasms to hold you up.
All right.
Think of the ego like that. Only think of it as a muscle made out of energy. The human ego came into existence to stop the whole human race going completely insane, which was happening in this world about 13,000 years ago. And we have this little ego now who's thinking, hey, it worked, so all you guys worship me. Ego is not consciousness, as Freud and Jung talked about. It's a part of consciousness. It's a very efficient part of consciousness. It's like the executive director in the corporation, for instance. But it's extremely authoritarian. It's extremely dictatorial. But my God, what would we have done without it?
Okay, so let me rephrase that for people who are scrambling to wrap their minds around it. It would seem that somewhere, somebody who sought power, who sought recognition, decided that he had an edge over a certain group of people and wanted to disconnect them from this magical harmony of the universe, this connectedness to the galaxy and the cosmos, by saying, forget about that, that's not the way to go, bring your attention from the universe down to me. In other words, stop looking up, look at me now, I'm going to replace the heavens. This is the right way to go, and here's a book and some ritual to fill this void, which, of course, is very difficult to do. You're talking about filling the void of the universe, but is that kind of what went down?
You couldn't have said it more precisely. It is exactly like that. And the ego then is a big promiser. It's just like any politician. It goes, look, of course you don't have the symbiotic connection that you're familiar with. Of course you don't have that beautiful nirvanic umbilical connection to the universe. But see, when you did have that, it'll get destroyed, you chumps. So listen, I'll give you the same thing. It'll just take time. I'll rebuild all of that behind the scenes, in the back lot, and you will have all of that, and we'll call it technology. Here, I will actually give you the same toys, the same power. You'll just have it in a bit of a different way.
It's interesting
more
because
masculine,
somebody must have realized that if they're connected to the cosmos, then there's no budget for churches. There's no hierarchy.
Right.
There is no sort of power or dominance over people. You can't have that unless you create something that is earthbound, that is on the plane of this material expectation. Do we have a starting point for when that first happened? Did that happen in Atlantis first?
No, it happened after the cataclysm. And this, what you're talking about, as David Icke always talks about, the five senses is all we have reality. Exactly. This was see, I can understand the case of the ego. The ego has a mighty big case when you bring up these issues. It goes, look, you guys were running around like headless chickens. I am your savior. And all the representatives that I create and put in front of you, you will get down on your knees and you will worship them, and there will be no question. Because you are renegade. You owe me your ass.
So it seems as though after this cataclysm, a lot of people's, or a certain amount of people's faith was shaken.
All the world. The whole world. The descriptions of it are unbelievable.
So it left everyone vulnerable
Yes.
to questioning their belief in the cosmos, and they wanted something immediate. They wanted something that would be a pat on the back.
Well, they wanted sanity. They wanted actually what we have is a semblance of sanity. It's like what you're saying. We don't really have the same thing anymore, and we certainly do not, except in some exceptional human beings who are still, the Mozarts and Beethovens and Salvador Dali's, who may still have an old throwback remnant of that immense connection to the real matrix. Well, the rest of us don't have that. The rest of us have ego. And ego is a chimera. Ego is a chameleon that can be all things to all people. It's the cosmic magician in the tarot cards that says, look, yeah, I know you don't have the real thing, but guess what? I can give you the illusion of the real thing. Don't you want to live in this sort of simulacra fantasy world that you have? Now, most of us kind of know that we're in on this conjurer's trick. But see, we don't have the alternative. And you know something? As soon as you start to think about the alternative, you have a wave of trauma. And rightly so, because the time, it's a defense mechanism. If your mind does in fact start to think about the other world or the pre-world or your state of consciousness before, you're met with fear, because that was the ancestral fear at the moment of changeover between the psychic hierarchy. When the ego took over, we were in a state of unbelievable trauma. So when you step out of the control zone of that the ego has prepared for you, this beautiful, nice, decorated little paddock, which you're not meant to go near the gate because it has an electric fence, and if you touch the electric fence, you're going to get a bloody shock. So most people stay within the consensus zone, saying, well, it's not great, but my God, I have all these thoughts of disaster, and I see demons, and I have also schizophrenic, what we call schizophrenic or bipolar people who see all this weird stuff and the rhetoric. I don't want to get into the whole thing, but
they were looking for security, or they were looking for comfort or security.
These are individuals who've broken through the ego trance. Most schizophrenics are actually brilliant people. Most people who have bipolar disorder and all of these things are individuals who wouldn't accept. So they kept on holding on to the electric fence.
Yeah.
And the electric fence incinerated their mind. The ego said, then you are renegade. You will be cast out. It's like they show in that movie Zardoz. You will become apathetic, or you dare to question my authority and wonder what's on the other side of the wall. It's like a Pink Floyd type situation.
Yeah, right on.
There must have been a door in the wall here when I came in.
Okay. Well,
anybody who starts to ask those questions,
let's go back.
Its representatives to you. Go, wait. Hey,
let's
boys,
go back to let's go back to this again original connection that these Atlanteans had with the cosmos and the zodiac. In their belief system, what was their answer to a supreme being?
Well,
did their belief system contain that concept?
I don't get into that because I do not want to get to turn people off by their... See, I know that if I start mentioning my belief systems on that, then I am immediately putting myself in reaction to those who are still in the consensus trance or who have a role situation. I don't want to get into it. My book doesn't get into it. It avoids the metaphysics of it. I've been actually even criticized for that. But there's a reason why I do that. It's because I want people to get into this knowledge objectively. I want them to come from whatever persuasion that they are coming from and investigate the facts without...
Okay. Let me roll it back then. So again, I'm trying to get a sense of this original relationship that people had to the stars, to the galaxy. Now, what it sounds like you're saying is that there was no supreme being.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying anything. I'm being neutral about it because...
I'm reading into it then. Okay. So let's... why is the fact that there was a God or no God such a hot topic? I mean, a lot of people are atheists.
Well,
a lot of people are agnostic. I mean, that's not a concept.
No, Rob, there is a God, but the God is the ego you've just been talking about. The ego has set itself up as the God. If you want the Gnostic truth, I'm a Gnostic, so I'm just going to hit you over the head with it. The ego is inflated because it did a job of work that was immense for the human race. In the throne, the empty throne, now you're asking what was on that empty throne before the ego put its ass there. I don't know. I'm not going to say, I have thoughts about it, but I'm not going to share those. All I'm concerned about right now is that this ego, the guy with a broken crown, who keeps putting the crown crown up and saying, hey, do I look all right? This ego that is in all of us is the ruler, the demiurge. The Gnostics call it Rex Mundi, the Lord of the world. And, some people have even said that the Jehovah has aspects of this demiurgic quality. The fact of the matter is, cut out all the religious jive and just go back to the psychological truth of it. The psychologists have terms for all of this. The ego, the superego, the consciousness that we have. We are no longer connected, we're divided. That divided was not unnecessary, it was kind of necessary in a way, because if you divide something, you can control it. So the ego knew that in order to create a semblance of reality, I mean, it's like in that movie Pink Floyd, The Wall. Remember after the guy goes through his utter chaotic breakdown, and then you see him putting together a mandala of all the little broken things that he's smashed up?
Yeah, Pink. Yeah.
Right, remember that?
Yeah.
That's exactly what the ego has done. The ego said, my God, look what you've left me. Look what consciousness is. You're going to tell me this is what consciousness is? We were the most bipolar. Read Julian Jaynes, the top scientist. I mean, you can't get any higher on the totem pole than these people, and they have explained it. The consciousness was in ruins, unimaginable ruins, in exactly the same way that the earth was in ruins. So it's like, along comes the ego, like that guy Pink, and goes, okay, I guess we can make a new mandala, something quite sacred, actually. But it will be a polyglot of all the pieces of the amazing world that we have left, and which is fading, which is already fading from us. We don't even remember. It's vague. It's a dream. And then we put it together. What we have now is that incredible sand painting, that amazing Tibetan mandala, which easily could blow away with the wind, and that's what might be coming in 2012, because it's an extremely fragile thing. And the end of the age of Pisces and the coming of the 2012 0 hour is, I believe, the end of that sand painting. It's already been blown.
All right, well, let's talk about that, too. I mean, it's interesting to think that our consciousness, human beings or whatever they were back in Atlantis, these humans were so connected to the earth, and that's, again, not unusual because there is a symbiotic, harmonious relationship to any entity in the planet that it dwells upon.
Right.
And once there was this cataclysm, a physical earth cataclysm, it's interesting that it had an instant and equal reaction in the consciousness of its inhabitants.
Of course, because it goes. Remember, we still have certain people who are creative, and even ordinary people. Everyone in this world has certain throwbacks. It's not that it's completely gone. It's just that under drugs, or when you have a euphoric experience, or an athlete who's won something, or you fall in love, all that malarkey, and all of these different what might be called the pheromones and the throwbacks. We all have it, and certain creative people have what they call the muse or the inspiration. So it's not completely gone. There is something that is anti-ego.
Okay, well, let me ask you this then, because you're the one to ask. If there was no cataclysm, where would, in your opinion, or just sort of maybe a general guess, would have the civilization been at? Where would they have ultimately perhaps evolved to?
Oh, unimaginable. We'd be in a golden age. We would have now what the ancient shamans of the Native American Indians were talking about, of this utter, unbelievable rapport, this umbilical connection to the animals, to the flora and the fauna. There wouldn't be any slaughterhouses, and that would do me. Just to get rid of them, I'm happy in the world. I think the world would be fine right now if we could just get rid of those. But if your scenario would be, we would not only be not mistreating animals, we'd be living in an indescribably brilliant place that nobody, not even, nobody in literature who's got even the most incredible imagination. This reality is beyond even Tolkien. It's like Tolkien leaves you at the end of the Lord of the Rings. He doesn't really show you what the world is that they're going to build after, the fall of the Dark Lord, because that's for your imagination. We would have kings that meant something to us. We would have, king comes from the word kin, kindred, your blood, a man or a woman who was literally so kindred to you, like the shamans of India, of the Native American Indians. We would have monarchs that we loved, who would die for us, who had total occult knowledge. All of us would realize that we were priests and priestesses. We wouldn't be overpopulating the world. We wouldn't be devastating the world. We would have such an immense connection to our inner core. I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah.
What the metaphysical and religious people are looking for. That's why I'm not against religion in certain senses.
Well, yeah.
Because I understand that the core of these religions is that utopian glow. It is that thing that we're all looking for.
Well, it seems as though our Achilles heel is our connectedness to this vulnerable planet. I mean, if there wasn't this cataclysm, it seems as though our evolution...
But don't let that be a cop-out, Rob. See, because my work is extraordinary, is idiosyncratic in that area. It's extraordinary in that area because I do not believe, like every other writer, that the event that caused these tribulations was just some straying comet that happened, act of God, freak of nature. I have linked it to an actual, same as the legends are telling believe that these were humanistic. They were humanoid in nature. The cataclysms that we have suffered through, and that our ancient forefathers are suffered, and that are written in our own DNA, in our scriptorium, the fears that we have, the phobias that we have, the fear of the ocean, the fear of lonely places, of thunder in the sky, all the rest of it, of certain insects. All of these traumas are humanoid creation. It was through this belligerent war that happened about 13,000 years ago that inherited this. The Earth didn't go through any pole shifts.
Oh, so there wasn't a comet or a meteorite?
Oh, no. As you've read in my first book, this was humanoid nature.
Yeah, okay,
and
so...
This is what then caused the schism. Now, remember, the first trauma, let's get things really straight. The first trauma, we've been talking about the trauma to the ego and the human race.
Yeah.
The first trauma was the hybridization. It was the genetic interference. So long before the pole shift and the War of the Gods, the very first trauma to the human being was already artificial. It was this Planet of the Apes type experimentation that went on, and I believe in future ages they're going to absolutely prove this. They already know it. They're just not letting us know about the DNA. The incising and the crossing of alien DNA with our human aboriginal DNA was already enough to shatter the consciousness that our forefathers knew.
Yeah.
What we've been talking about with the cataclysms is just like the icing on the cake. Taken together, the hybridization, the trauma that causes to the original mind of our ancestors, who none of them exist anymore, all of us are hybridized, and then subsequently the awesome trauma of the Earth itself, going through those cataclysms of the physical nature, left what we would want to call consciousness in a absolutely torn and ripped and psychotic state.
Oh, my goodness.
From that psychotic state, in exactly the same way, I mean, it is a true simile. In the way that you prop yourself up and your body goes taut when you try to, prevent yourself from falling, or you try to grab a glass off the table, there was a spasm in consciousness, collectively. And that spasm created the ego. I mean, the word ego is the word egg. It comes from the Latin egg, ego. And the egg split, and it's like this ego came out and said, I will save you. And that ego is still in spasm. That's why you can't talk to the ego. That's why the ego, spiritual people, gurus, anyone who's trying to deal with the ego, no, it's a damn hard nut to crack. And the reason is because, it had to be. It's spasmed like that, and it's so defensive and materialistic and masculine is the true term. It's very, very masculine. It's very torpid and rigid, armored. Is because that's the ego. You can't make it into something it's not. I go into this in some of my articles. Don't try to make the ego into something that it's not. You owe that ego. It may be like this office director, a real pain in the ass, and everybody hates it. But what would you do without that official director? Now, it's not the executive. The executive is spirit. But until the time that spirit wants to reassert itself in this universe and into the consciousness of human beings, we have the managing director. And you're going to take that managing director's order whether you like it or not, because it is the one that is created. Now, if you want to step out and be a hippie, there's the door. That's what the ego says. There's the door, guys. And that's what the 60s was. That's what happens to certain individuals today. That's what schizophrenia is. That's what all sorts of mental disorders are. There's a lot of nuance, but basically I'm being very general about it. But most people who cannot buy into the rigidity from childhood or down through their life either will become psychotic, they'll go into drugs, they'll become hippies, they might even become criminal, part of the criminal class. But you never totally step out of the aura of the ego. Even if you're outside the door, my mind goes to that scene in Beverly Hills Cop where they just throw the, what's his name?
Eddie Murphy
right out the window. I mean, you can have the representatives of the ego literally ditch you into the gutter, but you're never going to be totally free of it. You'll always have a remnant of it. Because the schizophrenia that happened to our forefathers is still, unfortunately, written in our own being. So even though the ego has glued things together pretty well, in some people it's not so glued, and they come unglued, and then you have the infusion of elements from the unconscious, which then causes these people terrible, terrible sorrow.
So could I say, in a grossly superficial and kind of encapsulated way, that the downfall of human first step was this alien hybridization, and the second step was this man-made cataclysm that perhaps resulted from it?
Yeah, it's absolutely. The two are connected. The fall, the original fall of the Garden of Eden can be seen as the hybridization. I see it that way. I see the interference, which is illegal. It's like any illegal immigrant coming here and then trying to run the government.
So why weren't we protected from on high? Was there no great power that was looking after us?
No, because man is his own great power.
Ah.
Our power was interfered with. Now that, again, brings us over into the metaphysical issues. What I will say is this. There is an overarching power, obviously, a universal intelligence that made our lives and made the universe, and it's not plugged in anywhere, so you know that there's something there. However, we must never underestimate the adversarial nature of the colonizers, the visitors to this planet. This is what my work is, fundamentally trying to get out to people, is the origins of evil.
Yeah.
I hear so many people, I love the work of Graham Hancock and David Icke and so many other people, but, there's so much into this New Age escapist, what was the big question, and there's the question right in front of them. The question is, stop talking about heavens, Valhallas, and utopias, and start talking about the living hell that we're in, and the kind of injustices and sadism that we've inherited in this world. Let's find out its anatomy, and then we'll have some answers. And the answer is that we must focus on this question of evil, because it's in us in a soft way, and it is in the world. It's a living thing, and it's firing on all guns blazing situation right now. And we are its repository. We may have not inherited it, we may not have created it, but we are inherited it. It came from outside like a virus infecting a planet, but we now have it in our system. So the real question of life is whether or not we are going to get the chance to do that. Because here's the most interesting thing, Rob.
Okay.
The ego has another particular aspect to it. Like any human being, it can die. Its death is very long. It's like, remember the Vedic ages, the yugas?
Yeah.
The yugas are always described as the age of a day in the life of the god Brahma, who is born, who lives, and then who dies. Well, who are they talking about? Brahma is the ego that has a life of millions and millions of days. Wow. But the fact of the matter is that he does die. Now, coming up to 2012 and the age of Pisces, the closing of the age of Pisces, which is what Jordan Maxwell has talked about a lot. And now we're all getting into this vogue thing about the Mayan end date. In simple terms, because I've done a 13-hour DVD on that very subject, one can get into it in a long way, but in very simple terms,
okay.
Let's just think of it as that the ego has created, like Pink, he's created this incredible mandala, but, that mandala is finite. It's not made of the same stuff as the universe is. It's an ego concoction. It's a simulacrum.
It's a safety mechanism or a Band-Aid.
Yes, and it has a fail-safe. It might fade out. So there's cycles. In everything in this world, including the seasonal cycles, there is a cycle, a rhythm, a series of phases. So what we're looking at the coming of 2012, and this is, again, in very much general and brief, is that we are ending one series of ego life. Ego is an old man now. It's like he's the hermit instead of the fool in the tarot. And he's waning down. So what the end of the age of Pisces is, and we all know that Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac, which verifies what I'm saying. All astrologers know that Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. We are then finishing one massive zodiological or psychological, because there really is no difference. We're going to make a lot of progress in this world when we understand that there is no difference between the words zodiological and psychological. People need to get their heads around that. But back to our story. The idea is that one end cycle, yuga, the end of one cog, is coming at 2012, and the sand painting, which is already pretty, faint, because it's been blown significantly through the years, what's left of it is going to could be erased. This is one of the theories that we're thinking of, that man doesn't even get a chance to get it right, because ego himself is resigning his post for another incarnation.
Huh.
So we have to look into this. I know that's a bit Vedic and a bit to do with reincarnation and certain things, but, I have to use the jargon. It's all just jargon. I have to use the jargon that I'm familiar with.
Sure, no, we're cool with that.
We are ending a cycle that the Maya talked about, in which it might be that the gatekeepers coming and going, you're all fired, the corporation is done, or whatever you want, is sold,
yeah.
And we're putting the lock on the gate, and you guys can just take off.
And what will replace this ego, this little sort of safety spare tire that we've been running on that's now almost out of tread?
That's a great metaphor. I don't know. It could be a Mercedes or it could be a freaking rickshaw. I don't know what's coming next. Nobody does.
Well, we do know. Everything is available, as I like to say.
We know. How can we know, man? We're looking at the plate glass of the corporation that we're in.
Because we are empowered. We are emboldened. We are in touch. We can open up a window to the universe. We are infinite beings with infinite potential.
Well, that's right. And this is the work that, ultimately is what I'm trying to do.
So, if we put our minds to it, we think, right, the ego now, the age of the ego is now coming to an end. And I think that we will see another round of Earth changes. I think there's going to be a meteor or comet, but it's not going to hit the Earth. It's going to hit the moon. And when it hits the moon, it's going to knock the moon out of its very precise equilibrium orbit. And when that happens, it's going to throw the tidal wave off. It's going to throw the tidal patterns off. And when that happens, we're going to see incredible flooding and devastation and tsunamis. So, it's going to be the age of water. What's the first sign of the zodiac?
The first sign is Aries, fire.
Fire. Okay, I just took a stab in the dark there. But I think, to go back to it, I think we're going to see another round of Earth changes, and maybe that will be the thing that finally cuts the umbilical cord.
Could be.
You know, of the ego, or rather, just throws the last pile of dirt on its grave.
Right, exactly.
And then,
you do have those two schools of thought. A lot of people are going to be rejoicing in it, and part of me also rejoices in it.
Right.
Because the status quo that we've been living in has been so terrible, and if you really want honest opinion, that any break of that status quo could be a fine thing.
It's a birth
and
or
we
a
have
death.
the other school that's immensely traumatized by it and can't and is lost because of that.
Yeah, I wonder if it. A lot of people like to think that it's going to be the ETs that show up and fill this void.
See? I mean,
Maybe
you have
it'll
that
be
theory. What's interesting is I have been so not able to think about that theory because what has gained my attention is a little bit different gear.
Okay.
Is that because of the countdown to the finality of this phase, the power elite structure of the world, that means the government forces and the people behind them, of course they know about what we're talking about. They have their experts also know, and I believe that the Nephilim descendants of the Atlanteans also know that this massive change is coming, and they have an agenda too. So what we've been talking about is a general agenda for the whole human race. But see, we must never forget that the ones who have the control over the ship of state also are very aware of this coming ending date. And, there's been talk of photon belts, and there's been talk of other constellational alignments that might precipitate these changes, and I believe those are already happening. So don't you see the dark side, those ones who have been the most perverse henchmen of the ego, who've abused the status quo, who say, well, listen, if we've got an evil demiurge ruling the executive, but he lives up in his penthouse and it's like that movie Free Jack, he's up there, hey, we're the petty ones, but we'll go and lord it over everybody else and keep everybody in a state of servitude to us, and he won't know anything about it. And he might even be endorsing it, for goodness sake. So all these degenerates who run the system of the world, the perverse ones that we all know about and are finding out about, these world controllers might have a lot to fear by the selling out of the business, because they're now going to be on the streets with the rest of us. So there's a certain situation in which they are threatened. And my focus has been on what might their possible reactions be. I see a lot of strange rituals taking place in the Middle East. I see a lot of this connection to the invasion of Iraq, you see. There's lots of different saber rattling going on right now, including some very bizarre rituals that people get onto my blog, and you can get to the blog through the Taroscope's website. You'll see that if you go to the section on 2012, there's a link to a very strange, totally bizarre ritual that was done by the American troops out in Babylon, in which they made the symbol of a gigantic, and you could only see it from the air, a feathered serpent.
Really?
We talk about in the book the meaning of the serpent.
Well, where does this information come from?
This just happened, Rob, on April 16th. Maybe your show can cover it.
Well, what's the source?
The source is whatdoesitmean.com. Go there.
Oh, another website? Did they get it from any established news outlet?
Yes.
Which
been
one?
covered. It's been covered. It's on my blog. It's on my.
Well, I'm just asking since we're talking about it now. And was there any significant information that was imparted, or was it just some photograph that somebody saw?
No, this is military people leaking it. The people who were involved in the ritual. Some woman from a military who participated in this.
Okay.
Because they were a Christian or whatever, was like completely spare over this, going, what in the hell is this? And it's not only one. There's been many. There's been many rituals.
Well, yeah, we can imagine, huh?
Yeah, many things going on. And this specific one, you see, they know about constellational alignments, and you're going to see more. You think this is the only one? Just keep your eyes open. From now in the next 7 years, there's going to be the most bizarre, this whole thing with this Bush going around to all these sacred sites, having his hand shake in front of in Mexico there, the Clinton having his hand shook down in front of the Mayan calendar when he was in power. All of these politicians go to certain sacred sites, to Palenque, and because they're waving to you. They're waving symbolically. These people never tell you what's happening in words.
What do you think is going to happen with Iran?
It's all fear. There's sacred sites in Iran that they want. There's burial sites of the Nephilim. This is my thesis. My thesis is that the ancient Nephilim. Remember how we've been talking about the original visitors to this planet?
Yes.
With the assumption that they're dead, that it's only the descendants are left.
Okay.
Well, as I left off in the Atlantis book having people think that. In the DVD I do on Atlantis and on 2012, I bring up a much more occult, controversial full-blooded alien, no human blood at all.
These are the guys that were referenced in Genesis 5.
The same characters have been interned in certain places on the earth and are still alive. They're really the undead. It's where the whole concept of the vampire comes from.
Really?
And that some of these leaders, because the leaders of the world, these lower henchmen, have not been able to find out how they're going to save their ass when the great cleansing comes in 2012, when there's these changes in consciousness. They have been so desperate to find the answer for many, many millennia now, not just the last 10 years. They've been looking for the remedy of how to offset some of these cleansing patterns that Mother Nature is bringing in, which is going to deal with them. They're not able to handle this. So in last resort, so to speak, they're actually going to disinter, because they know where these ancient grave sites are. It's like some sort of X-Files thing. I know it sounds like that, but it's an old occult agenda that has been spoken of in the ancient books, that these gods are interned in the earth. That's what they talk about in the book of Revelation when they say that the giants are chained to the earth for 1,000 years or a period.
Okay.
Under the earth, in Iran, in Iraq, and in Ireland, and in Palestine, and in certain other places in the world, in undefinable places. But they know where these places are because they have the ancient maps. The Vatican people have kept these maps. Now with the use of satellite, they can pinpoint these grave sites, these underground mausoleums. You know, just like you see in the movie Hellboy, and a lot of these movies that they're also revealing a fifth element. Watch what the movies are telling you because they're accurate. They're telling you in symbolic.
So the thinking is that they're going to go to these locations and release them?
They're already there. But you see, in Iraq, they couldn't be doing it with Saddam Hussein and a civilized country overlooking their shoulders. I mean, this is an X-Files type of experiment, but even with permission, they did not want to go in there with their tents and their laboratories and their experts with the Iraqi spies and Saddam looking over their shoulders, so they had a better idea.
What group of people, what secret society do you think oversees these operations?
This is there's many names. You know, one can use lots of different names. It's basically the Freemasons, the Masonic Order, or the preservers of this knowledge.
Okay. So what do we have any idea as to what happens when these ancient tombs are opened?
Oh, yeah. And it's not good, but that's a bit of a separate question. What's going on is that these individuals are in an undead state.
Right.
And they've been buried in certain places in tombs that are specially designed. And not the same way that you know about the pharaohs, but with crystalline technology. So these beings are truly vampiristic. They've been fed of all the pain and sorrow and death and murder and mayhem and wars of the world, all that fear, all of the tribulation, from serial killings, from the violence that you have in your own family, from the violence that leaks off of you and the fear when you watch TV, to the world wars, all of it taken in one only generates one emotion. Or two emotions, fear and anger and pain, right?
So it sustains them.
Individuals feed off of that through the earth grid.
So they're still alive down there, and each one is kept in a separate sort of tomb?
I don't know if they're separate, but there may be more than one in one tomb. I'm not sure. All I know is that these individuals, the legends say, are interned, and that they feed off what their henchmen do on the surface, which is that they create wars and mayhem so that they are fed by fear. These individuals...
So I wonder if they are overshadowing or if they are controlling certain key people up on the Earth's surface. They are.
Yes.
So the
those individuals who have taken over after they were interred have these secrets. And these individuals orchestrate the chaos in the world by design so that, one, their vampiristic leaders are fed with this energy because we don't know a lot about human energy and the leaking from the brain. Another thing that they do, just as an aside, but a very important one, is that they often schedule mass events, like everybody charging down to Stonehenge to look at some crop circle, for instance, or looking at an eclipse. They stage this stuff because the human brain is an incredible generator. And we have around this earth, all Feng Shui and geomantist people know that there's a dodecahedron, an earth grid. And through this earth grid that is linked to everybody and everybody's thoughts. All your thoughts and your fears and your pain and the death of all the ritual deaths and world wars that are still going on, all of this pours, just like Richard Hoagland has discovered, that all the atom bomb detonations, the banks, the stately homes, that are all on the 30th, between the 30th and 33rd meridian of the earth. There's a reason why civilization and many of these banks and world events take place on a certain area of the earth. In my book Atlantis, there's a whole chapter on this. Now, this is because of the earth grid, because they want the energy to channel in to the limbic psyche of these underworld beings that are created there, just like the movie Underworld and other movies have shown.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the energy now, the milk is starting to sour, and there's less and less fear for these people to generate. And what's the plan? They're gonna release them and then?
Oh no, there's more fear. It's just that they don't want to disinter them. They've had to because they have an overarching agenda, which is the coming of the end of the age of Pisces, or this Mayan end date, which could deal with photonic action. It might deal with some major earth cleansing. I haven't really thought about it, the mechanics of it is, because that's not important to me.
Yeah, but
all I know is that
what's the role of the Nephilim now, or in the near future?
Pardon?
What's the role going to be of the Nephilim once they are released?
Well, you see, we don't know what's going to happen when they're released. They might be as insane as hell and start devouring the very people that have disinterred them. They might not be happy. They may not be happy after 11,000 years being dug up by their chumps who go, hey, boss, I think, we kind of blew it. Can you give us some guidelines? And they may be not happy, saying, you mean to tell me that 11,000 years have elapsed, you've controlled the world, you've raped every nation, you have everybody under servitude, and you can't find a way to offset this particular, natural organic change that's taking place, and you wake me up. They may not be in a good mood.
That's
like
true.
That way.
Never, and people get grumpy after 11,000 years.
I know, and especially when they want feeding.
My
belief, and I talk about this in the DVD,
yeah.
that the ritual death of all the people in Iraq, all the mass murder that's been taking place there under the name of war,
yeah.
Isn't it true that when any creature first breaks from an egg, what is the first thing that it needs to do?
It needs to clean up.
No, it needs to eat.
Oh, right, that too.
Right, all species, when you see it breaking from the egg, the first thing it needs to do is feed. In fact, it eats its own egg, often, right?
Well, yeah, it has a bite of, it has something going on there.
Right, so I believe that prior to the point where they're going to try and awaken this, part of the ritual involves a massive ritual death on site.
Right, they're going to have some minions there for them to feed on.
That's what they've been doing. The mass murder that's been taking place in Iraq has got nothing to do with America being threatened, 11, or oil, or Cheney having a bad day. No.
What about the hundreds of kids that go missing every year?
Same thing. That's another thing I'm very tied into. The whole story of ritual death, and and that's so horrific. We don't even want to get into it. I'll leave the experts. But my work also involves in Atlantis, and the DVD that's coming out in Atlantis, 15 hours long. We go into the whole story of the Nephilim and their internment and what's been really going on this planet. Especially by way of the Earth grid. People need to get into geomancy and feng shui and realize that even the emotions that you leak when you turn on the news is for them. The news is a picture show that they show you in order to continue to have you come out of your center, come out of your spirit body, and start leaking fear, just like David Icke has said many times, start leaking all these negative emotions so that they have a nice feed, a nice hors d'oeuvre.
Okay, so here's kind of the last question that it says in Genesis, the story of Noah, when it talks about the Nephilim, that they were on Earth and they mated with certain women. Are the offspring and lineage of these inter sort of species mixtures still on Earth, and these are the ones that are in power today?
Yes. Precisely right. This is what David has exposed. We're all exposing this now. Some of the bloodline books that came out before hinted at it. But definitely David and...
are these the bloodlines of the Illuminati?
You got it.
Yeah?
Yeah, no question about it. This is what we exposed, that these people, the royal families, have kept meticulous bloodlines of going back through the Hanoverian line we were talking about.
Well, that would also imply that these royal families and who else is part of this bloodline are also part vampire.
Of course they are.
Now, does that mean that they feed on human blood?
Well, that's the part I wouldn't put it past them. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
But I certainly know they feed on human negative energy. I'll go so far as to say that.
But so we're just unclear about their particular dietary requirements.
Precisely. It's whether it's the hors d'oeuvre or whether it's a snack or whether it's basically they're feeding on the human race. Period.
I understand.
The fact that they haven't started eating their bodies is a minor point, and they may even be doing that. I mean, I don't put it past them. Crime to me is less about that, as about putting the whole human race up as a blood ritual, so that they can find from these extraterrestrial or actually pan-dimensional entities this key to getting off this planet, because the key is that they've been interred on this planet, and they can't get off, and in thousands of years, almost 11,000 years or more, they have not found a way to do it.
Yeah.
So they're actually doing, this strategy that we're talking about of them unearthing the Nephilim is not something on their agenda. They do not want to do it.
Yeah.
They're having to do it because time is getting short for them.
Yeah, well, time is also getting short for us. You've got a new DVD out.
A whole set, 6 series.
6 series set. Good heavens.
22 DVDs in all. It's 6 box sets.
Bloody hell.
People can go to my website. They have their own website, Rob. It's originsandoracles.com. Or you can get to it by way of Taroscopes, but it has their own website, originsandoracles.com.
Okay.
They'll be released. The release date is the 27th of April.
All right.
We will be releasing those to the public. It's been 2 years in the making.
Yep.
They're wonderful. Wonderful project.
Well,
They're not edited for time or content.
I wish you well on those. And of course, you do have this new book coming out soon about the
Irish
origins.
Irish origins of civilization. The previews to the book are on my Taroscope's website under the astrotheology pages. So if people are interested in that thesis, they can go to the astrotheology pages on the Taroscope's website. But the book itself will be out in late summer. We have the wonderful artist Jim Fitzpatrick from Ireland doing the cover art. Really wonderful. It's going to be a very great project.
Oh, brilliant. Well, Michael, once again, it has been an extraordinary show. We covered more on this program than some people do in a lifetime.
I know it, and that's why I love to come on. So I hope to see you at Conspiracy Con, too. I know that, are you going to be at Conspiracy Con?
Absolutely. I'm going to be there with some of the other speakers. It's always an incredible event.
Yeah, let's have a lot of people come and support Conspiracy Con. The information's on my website, or you can go to conspiracycon.com for Brian Hall's wonderful, one-of-a-kind, get-togethers of the great intelligences so that people can find out what is going on.
Absolutely. If people liked the content of this interview, they will like to come there because they get more of it. They get information about some of the conspiracies that's related to economics and theology and politics and so much more. It is really the invisible college. Michael Tsarion, thank you so much.
You're welcome, my friend.
Well, that about does it for today's show. I'd like to thank Michael Tsarion for coming on, and for everyone listening. This one was a real paradigm shifter.